Hello everyone, welcome back to an especially head-banging episode of Zilog and Moto, the show where we're on a 25-year journey to review every officially released English-language Master System, Genesis, Sega CD, and 32X game, and maybe the occasional new release as well, like the recent awesome thumbstick shooter Xenocrisis in episode 48, and the newly programmed port of Darius on the Sega Genesis Mini in episode 35. If you're a Genesis fan and you're not familiar with those two, definitely make time to check those videos out after watching this one. They're both fantastic efforts worthy of your time. However, not every game in the catalog can live up to the heights of those releases. Some of these games are great, and some are just mediocre, and some are, well, they're not good, and that's being nice. And while I was a Sega kid back in the early 90s, there's a ton of these games that I've never heard of before starting this collection, much less played. So some of the thrill of going through this list and reviewing these games is picking a game off the shelf and just wondering, is this going to be a good one, or is it going to suck? Having said all that, this week's game isn't a complete mystery for me. Crue Ball, released in November of 1992, just in time for the Christmas season, is a heavy metal themed pinball game developed by New Effects and released by Electronic Arts. I actually remember playing this game back in the 90s, I believe as a weekend rental, but with a lot of these things, almost 30 years later, those memories have gotten a little bit fuzzy. So while I have played it before, this last week really served as being thoroughly reintroduced to the title. One of the things I like about doing these reviews is finding out odd factoids about some of these titles that I never would have known if I hadn't done the research involved with these reviews. A good example of that is that Crue Ball wasn't originally designed to be Crue Ball and have an association with Motley Crue. It was always supposed to be a heavy metal themed pinball title called Twisted Flipper in development, but EA originally reached out to MTV to relate the game to their metal show Headbangers Ball, but apparently they couldn't come to an agreement, so in came Motley Crue, and Crue Ball was born. But I've got to say, it was definitely a strange time for the band to release a video game with their name on it. Their previous studio album, Dr. Feelgood, which Crue Ball references, came out 3 years before, and Motley Crue had just lost lead singer Vince Neil to a solo career due to Vince either quitting or being fired in February of 1992. I guess it was a way to keep their name in the press while they figured out their next move, and it was probably their last chance to release something featuring their 80s material due to the arrival of grunge and their own somewhat drastic change in sound on their next album, featuring singer John Corabi. So, having said all that, how much can a game that effectively had the Motley Crue label slapped on it at the last minute actually have to do with the band? And with or without the Motley theme, is the game itself any good? Something that has to be asked since many licensed games try to just get by on their name alone. Well, I look at all that, as Zilog and Moto has some fun with video pinball for the first time, but before hitting the targets and lighting the lights, let's have a look at the package. And as I'm sure you had no problem figuring out, this is Crue Ball. Crue Ball, being an EA title, comes in the third generation EA case, with EA starting out using cardboard boxes and then moving to thicker clamshells before these more standard size clamshells. But a signature of EA cases is they didn't include hang tabs at the top. This case unfortunately has seen better days because if you take a look at the top corner you can see it's cracked, and then it doesn't stay closed due to the clasp on the inside being broken. My guess is that at some point this got stepped on or crushed, and this is the result. So kids, don't leave your games on the ground. They will get stepped on and broken. Other than that, the outer clear portion of the cover is in decent shape, but there are a few nicks here and there. The inner cover, however, is thankfully completely intact and in great shape, minus a small mark on the front. But other than that, no tearing anywhere or edge wear at the top or bottom, and no water damage or sun bleaching. Just the cover looking exactly like it did 28 years ago. Up in the corner there's a note about which Motley songs are actually included in the game, Dr. Feelgood, Home Sweet Home, and Livewire, encompassing all eras of their career at that point.
And just as a note, for the Motley geeks out there, I found it interesting that they used the same logo for their name as was used on their most recent greatest hits release at the time, Decade of Decadence. The rest of the cover features a modified picture of Motley Crue mascot Alistair Fiend from the Dr. Feelgood era. And before you say, who? Yes, Motley did have a mascot similar to Eddie of Iron Maiden or Vic Rattlehead of Megadeth, but Motley didn't put a lot of focus on Alistair, as he was mainly used on various band shirts from the mid to late 80s, and never appeared on an album cover. Alistair makes a great figure for a video game cover, so I think it was a great choice to use him here, even though the average fan may not be familiar with him. The rest of the cover is in the usual early 90s EA format, with the artwork and title being bordered by two columns on the sides, and I really like how they work the two Marshall stacks into that format. This is an iconic cover as far as Genesis titles are concerned, so much so that the European, Japanese, and American covers are all almost identical. Flipping over the back, no pun intended, and there's a large shot of Alistair from the game at the top, followed by some pretty great flavor text, and 3 smaller screenshots at the bottom. The screenshots are all decent quality, but a bit boring. I think I would have tried to pick 3 that had a little more action going on. But I do like how the entire back is lit up like being on a concert stage. That's a cool look. And then just a quick note, if you see down at the bottom, it says 1 player, and that's not really true. While only 1 person can play at a time, the game does support up to 4 players taking turns, like a real pinball game. And I'm kind of surprised they messed that up. Usually manufacturers like to advertise when a game is potentially multiplayer, but I guess they were more focused on the layout. Opening the case up and the manual and cartridge are both looking pretty good. The manual is in that usual thicker, shorter EA style, and on the back there's a pretty nice looking ad for Shadow of the Beast 2. Those rear cover ads are always a nice touch. This is actually a really nice manual content-wise, and extremely helpful to playing the game without having to look things up on the internet. You might be wondering why I'd mention that, since it's just a pinball game, but Crue Ball has a 9-level progression system, and the manual has instructions on what you have to do to pass each level that might not normally be obvious. And the manual talks about the Kickstart ball save system, which is critical to understand if you want to have a chance to beat the game. This is exactly what people today are missing with not giving manuals with their games. Okay, that's the Crue Ball package. Let's see what happens when we boot this up. The video game pinball genre has a long history, and I've been playing these types of games since I was a child, starting with video pinball on the Atari 2600, and then David's Midnight Magic on the Commodore 64, and then strangely a separate Midnight Magic back on the 2600 again. I don't know how Atari managed to get away with that one, but I digress. Modern video game pinball titles, however, can be tracked back to the Crush series that started out on the PC Engine / TurboGrafx 16. And you can definitely look at Crue Ball and see how directly it was influenced by those earlier titles, via multi-tiered table layouts and animated enemy targets. Having said that, Crue Ball is a wholly original title and concept that just happens to borrow play elements from those other titles, rather than a clone of anything else. It's similar to how all physical pinball cabinets feature things like bumpers, ramps, and targets, but the games themselves are structured in different ways as to not rip one another off. Developer NewFX was brand new to the scene, with Crue Ball being their first release for the Genesis, as previously their focus had been on portable titles for the Atari Lynx. Normally that might be a bad thing, as even seasoned developers can have trouble with their first effort, and getting familiar with writing code for a new device. Wisely, the project also included experienced pinball designers Mark Springer and Brian Schmidt to handle the graphics and audio respectively, and it shows, as Crue Ball definitely doesn't look or sound like it came from a development team that had little experience. Mark Springer had worked on artwork for 7 pinball machines at that time, including famous titles like Space Shuttle, High Speed, Fire, and Harley Davidson, and Brian Schmidt had done audio for 13 pinball machines, with titles like Black Knight 2000, Back to the Future, The Simpsons, Batman, Lethal Weapon 3, and Star Wars. So this was clearly a project being handled by people that knew what they were doing. Before getting too deep into the actual review, I figured I should probably target the whole issue of the fact that the game wasn't originally designed as Crue Ball. Designing a video game is like anything else complex. A house, a car, a movie, etc. And usually when there's a specific theme you're going for, that theme needs to be decided on at the outset. Without having that theme in mind in the beginning, it makes it very difficult for it to seem like it's not something that's just tacked on, and having little to do with the actual product. Unfortunately, Crue Ball does feel like that to an extent. As I mentioned earlier, if you didn't know who Alistair Fiend was, or recognize his look from the Dr. Feelgood era, there's almost nothing visually in the game that would make you think of Motley Crue. And the 3 Motley Crue songs that are advertised on the front cover, well, you will only hear those if you play them in the sound test, or if you happen to activate a round in the bonus area. Normally, you would only hear the regular in-game music for each level while you're playing, which is not Motley themed at all. So, hardcore Motley Crue fans buying this game might be disappointed with their lack of appearance and stylings in the game. But I think the more casual fan won't have an issue, as it doesn't detract from the overall idea of it being a more generic heavy metal themed pinball game. So how does Crue Ball work exactly? Well, from a very basic standpoint, it's a pinball game, and it supports up to 4 players alternating, just like a traditional modern machine. In traditional pinball, while the end goal is to score as many points as you can before running out of balls, there are goals to achieve while playing, usually by hitting certain targets or shooting the balls up specific ramps, and these goals are usually key to achieving very high scores while playing. But you don't ever complete a game of traditional pinball, you just keep playing. Crue Ball, due to it being a video game, works a little different. The overall playfield is made up of 3 smaller rooms that stack upon one another. The goal is to move the ball from the lower room up to the middle room, and then finally to the top room, where you have to knock down a wall and shoot the ball into a loop, which moves you up a volume level to go along with the heavy metal theme. However, before you can get up to that top room, you have to hit targets and destroy a certain amount of enemies in the lower and middle rooms. Once you have made it to the next level, all the rooms reset, and you now have to hit different targets and enemies to do it all over again, with the physical structure in the middle room changing with each volume level to add variety. The game has a total of 9 volume levels, so making it to the top on volume level 9 to crank it to 10 finishes the game. As much as I like standard pinball, I really like the idea of being able to complete Crue Ball, as it gives you a goal to keep aiming towards every time you pick up the controller, versus just setting a high score, which isn't necessarily indicative of how far you made it in the game, just due to how the multipliers work. Every player when playing starts out gets 4 balls, which is a little weird when it comes to pinball, as classic pinball tables from the 70s and on back would give you 5, and modern tables have a standard of 3. Not that I'm complaining, mind you, because you're going to need every single ball and lucky bounce to have a chance of beating the game. Thankfully, you can also get extra balls by hitting certain score targets in the game, and every time you destroy Craig, the tough enemy that protects the wall you have to get through to advance levels. Make no mistake about it, to make it to the end of Crue Ball is difficult, even with having a manual or online help, and after playing it a bit, I remembered why I didn't care for it too much when I played it originally as a teenager. Another assist that the game gives you to try and deal with making it through all 9 volume levels is the maddening kickstart feature that I mentioned earlier when talking about the manual. Essentially, once you get past the first level, either the left or right ball drain of the lower room will be lit up green, indicating that if the ball goes down that side, you won't lose it, and it'll be shot back up into the middle room. The reason why I call it maddening, however, is you have to hit the button for the opposite flipper to make that drain light come on. So, for instance, if the ball is coming down the left drain, you have to hit the C button on the controller to save the ball, and vice versa. This is the exact opposite of what your brain is trained to do in these situations, because when you see the ball coming down the left side, you immediately want to hit the left flipper, and what makes this worse is that sometimes the green light will already be lit up on that side, and you hit that flipper button anyway just as a trained reaction, and you end up accidentally switching the light to the other side as a result, and losing the ball. I'm not a controller thrower, but after doing this a number of times, especially in the middle of good runs, let's just say I understand. However, as frustrating as this sounds, I actually like it, and Crue Ball is very unique for implementing this feature and even giving you more control over whether a ball drains or not. Between the kickstart feature and being able to bump the table as much as you want to avoid center drain shots, a well-trained Crue Ball player is only going to lose a ball to an unlucky situation. And I wish real pinball operated more like this, as having that feeling of being in control of the game versus more of luck of the draw with various ball bounces is very nice. Graphically, Crue Ball looks like what you would think a heavy metal themed pinball game would look like. There's creatures that are essentially skulls, brains with a single eyeball, worms, skeletons, freaky jack-in-the-box clowns, and even Craig is wearing sunglasses as he protects the wall, like security staff keeping fans away from the band. And along with that, the pinball table's background has things like stage lights and volume meters to enhance the rock show feel. The game doesn't do anything too impressive graphically, but then again, with it being a pinball game, you wouldn't necessarily expect that either, as the core function of the game is simply moving a ball around with flippers. The audio in Crue Ball is where the game truly shines, and in fact I'd say out of all the Genesis games I've reviewed so far in the first 79 episodes of Zilog and Moto, Crue Ball has the best audio of any original release Genesis title I've looked at so far, with only Sword of Vermilion even coming close. If it wasn't for people like Brian Schmidt showing what was possible with the Genesis, I don't think we would have gotten releases like Xenocrisis and Darius in the last few years. It's that impressive. And also, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that just because I like Motley Crue. I do, and in fact I've seen them in concert more than a few times, but as I mentioned earlier, their contributions to the game in reality are pretty minimal. Most of what you're hearing in the game is all Brian Schmidt. Each volume level you reach has a different audio track to go with it, and they're all great. Due to that, and the inclusion of the 3 Motley tracks in the bonus levels, the background music never gets old, which is important, because when playing well, a round of Crue Ball is going to take at least 30 minutes. The sound effects included in the game are of high quality as well, and sound like a good mix of pinball type effects and crashes or explosions from an action title, both of which do a good job of keeping you engaged with what's currently going on during the gameplay. Also, full disclosure, while I try to beat all these games the week that I play them for the review, sometimes due to difficulty or time constraints, that just isn't possible. And in Crue Ball's case, I've only made it about halfway through volume level 5. But due to how fun Crue Ball is, and the absolutely fantastic soundtrack, I definitely will be coming back to it at a later date, probably multiple times, to give it another shot and try to finally turn it up to 10. Due to that great desire for replay that the game instills, and due to the technical achievement of the soundtrack, I'm giving Crue Ball 4 out of 5 stars. Obviously, with this being the first pinball game I've played on the Genesis, I can't say for certain it's the best on the system, but other titles like Dragon's Fury and Dragon's Revenge have a very high bar to get to if they want to take the crown from Crue Ball when I get to them. If you're not a pinball fan, I suppose you can take a star away, but there's still some great technical merit here, and really, come on, who doesn't like pinball?
Okay, that was Crue Ball. This week proved, thankfully, that nothing was wrong with my backup Genesis, and whatever issues I was having last week with Slapshot was definitely just cartridge related, because I played a lot of Crue Ball this week. I probably logged at least 10 hours on it, and the way my schedule is, that means it must be good. I've talked about this before, but this is one of those games that I really enjoy playing for the channel, not because it's a good game necessarily, but because it's something that I played as a kid, and now being an adult, I was able to go back with a fresh and much older set of eyes that understands how to really play the game, and as a result, I had a much better experience with it this time around. And now I have a more positive view of the game that just wasn't possible on a weekend rental back in 1993. Just as a quick programming note, I'm not sure when I'll be getting back to the Sega CD and a 32X, as my Tower of Power is being serviced, so things will likely be all Genesis and Master System for at least a few weeks. Which is fine, I certainly have plenty of those titles to work on. But having said all that, next week's title is staying on the Genesis, and it's yet another game that I've never played before. It's a platformer, with this game featuring the title character from the most popular syndicated comic strip of the 80s and early 90s. And in an interesting note, picking this title out actually caused me to upgrade my copy, as I didn't realize just how poor a condition my copy was until I grabbed it off the shelf to prepare for the video. Thankfully, it's a relatively common game, so I was able to find a better copy pretty easily, and we'll be able to show that in next week's review. Remember, whatever you like to play, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.